All right, welcome back everybody. So we have about two kind of bigger fabrication jobs left before we button up the rear of this car. It's definitely taking a little bit longer than I thought, but at the same time too, I wanted to make sure I did it right and make sure I was covering all angles, mainly so I can get what I want out of this. I really want the car to be super, super low. I didn't want to just bag it for the sake of bagging it. So just a couple little things that I'm coming across which I knew I was gonna have to address. The one we're going to be working on today is the rear tie rods. Where they are, they actually hit in the frame rail when you start to lay the car out. I did run across the same problem when I did my low coilovers, when I ended up flipping them around, which worked out really well for that application. But now that the airbag's right there, you can't really do that because they hit. With them on top, it works out fine the way it is from the factory, but in order to go really low when you air the thing out, that is one of the issues. So I am gonna make brackets today to actually lower it down, and I'm actually gonna use like a heim joint instead of the factory tie rod to, you know, duplicate that or to match that so it kind of works the same function, but lowers it down and gives me all the clearance I need up without having to cut all the way up into the frame to clear the tie rod ends. So we're gonna work on that today. We'll probably end up pulling that whole thing out, paint it, clean it up, make it look a little nicer while we're doing it, while we're there. And then after that, we just have to address the whole shock issue as far as mounting. You could run just a factory style shock in the car if you were gonna bag it normally without going these like extra steps that I'm going to. So we're gonna end up having to make a custom shock lower mount for it, similar to like the Van Steel mount, but it's gonna be sitting a little lower, but we'll get to that probably next video. So we're just gonna get ahead and just start working on these brackets and just put this one step behind us. All right, so now that the airbag's in place there, just want to point out where the rear tie rod for the toe is, and you can see that it actually would hit right here in the frame section here. So I'm going to put the wheel back on and I'm going to jack it up just to show you what it would look like if you would just put this bolt in set up here, and when you would lay it out, it's going to hit here, and this is where the factory bump stop would bolt to. I had taken this out with my coilovers anyway, but I'm probably going to end up just taking this all off here for clearance too. And then I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with my rear tie rod end here. But let me get the wheel on it, and then we'll just jack up the wheel here. All right, you can see there, that is bottomed out, which isn't really bad if you think about it. But that's also probably maybe an inch or half inch or so lower than how my setup was on my coilovers. But I had the tie rod flipped on that. So the tie rod in the factory position, it's bottoming out right there. So if you just did bag the back of it and put it on, that's how low you would be, which still looks really good. All right, so I took the tie rod back off. My plan is to do this. I'm gonna make a bolt-on bracket that bolts here to the factory knuckle, and I have a heim joint, which is right here, which is 14 by 1.5 thread that I'll thread right into the factory end, rod end here. And then I'm going to make this bracket that has the heim joint bolts right up to it like this, and gives me a little bit more clearance with my airbag. And also it'll be lower enough where it won't hit up in here. The other alternative to go as low as I want to go would be to notch all in this frame here, which I'm just not trying to do. It's just a big undertaking, and just kind of want to get away from cutting too much of the frame up. But I will kind of clear up a couple little areas in here, but nothing major. So I'm going to go ahead and start making some brackets up here that are going to bolt in, and then some tabs here for this heim joint. I may have to shorten this down just a little bit, but I do have another tap too that I can just run down if I need more thread length there. All right, so I have these pieces rough cut. I'm gonna actually bolt them together just so I can finish them off on the belt to make them all the same. So this is gonna go like this on the knuckle where the tie rod goes. It's gonna sandwich on, this would be the top, and this will be the bottom, and they're gonna make a bracket here where the heim joint will bolt to there. So I'm just gonna bolt all these together, get them all finished up so they're all the same size, and then start mocking up the other pieces. Alright, so I got my pieces bolted in place here, and that's what that'll look like. And then I'm going to make a piece that goes in the front here, and that's where the tabs for the heim joint will bolt to. There's actually like a little like dimple on the back of this knuckle part, which I'm going to grind flat just to make a little bit more clearance from my flat piece that's going to go on the front of that. So I'm going to grind that down, and then I'm going to make this piece here in the front and these tabs. All right, so I have my pieces all cut here. So this is what I'm gonna do. This is the piece that's gonna bolt to the knuckle, and then I'm gonna mount this, these two tabs, down here like this, giving me more room. The reason why I'm not doing it like this is because this bolt will run really close to the airbag. So we're gonna mount it like this down here. So I may have to get some spacers for this, but we're going to check the movement. Since the other end is not a heim joint, it should give us plenty of play, but once we get in the car, we'll check, make sure we don't have any binding or any issues like that, and we'll check it for clearance. So I'm going to tack this in place, and we'll go hang it on the car. All right, so now it's mocked in place. It's kind of hard to tell, because this is probably fully extended, maybe a little past. So you can see there is clearance there from the air spring. And then now we're going to just compress it up, and I'll show you what I mean here. All right, so there is pretty much the air springs bottomed out about 3 inches there. Now you can see that's why that's that way. It sits right up in the frame like that. And then another thing is, that's the bump stop, and it's actually sitting on it. Well, the bracket where the bump stop bolts to, my bump stop's gone, but I'm going to remove this too, because I'm trying to get this to go up as much as possible. All right, so here are the driver and the passenger side ones, and this is kind of what it'll look like done. I added these stops here. This will actually go on the side of the knuckle, or the back side of the knuckle, to keep this from moving around like this on the car if it's just bolted in there or something like that. So this will actually flush right against the back of the knuckle, holding that in place. And then I tacked in a gusset back here for extra support. I'm not going to weld these things up completely yet. I'm going to get everything hung in the car and make sure all the suspension cycles right and there's no binding or anything like that. This is kind of like a tight area with the tie rod and stuff like that, so I want to make sure I'm 100% correct before I weld these up, just in case I have to make any changes. So, but that's what that's going to look like. All right, I have the tie rod assembly out. I'm going to get it all cleaned up here. It's a little gunked up. I'm going to end up running these in a little closer here for room, and then I'm going to be cutting a 1/2 inch off of this end to make room for the lock nut for the rod end here. So just to give us a little bit more room so we can get that on there, since we're kind of shortening this length with that new tie rod bracket that we're making. So I'm going to get this cleaned up, maybe put some paint on it or so, and rethread these two a little bit if they need it. I bought a tap 14 by 1.5 millimeter, which is the same as these. So we're gonna go ahead and get that going. All right, I have it all painted. Rod ends in with the brackets. The hardware all ready to roll. I'm just gonna put this back in the car. We're one step closer. All right, so that's a wrap for today's video. So we are definitely getting closer. We just have a couple more things to address before we get this thing kind of buttoned up in the back. So if you enjoyed the video, press like, subscribe. Thanks for watching.